just taking a couple minutes. I think we're still right on schedule, actually, as far as I can tell. So now you're talking to a group of people who is much more aware of what's going on. And I think the biggest limiting factor that I can see after talking to a lot of people is financial. Most people are not financially independent to just go out and buy a farm or something like that. So there's all different grades of what they can possibly do.
Well, this is very true. It seems that having a lot of money is inversely proportional to your being awake or aware of conspiracy.
That is really an interesting observation.
It really is true, though. The more wealthy people have, they become worried about protecting that wealth and not destabilizing and not going against the establishment, which protects the wealth. And so it's very, very difficult to find anyone with money. And there are some exceptions. But I can count them probably on one hand.
And they tend to be those people tend to be reclusive, don't they? They fall in
Yes, because they realize if you stick your neck out, you get it chopped off. I mean, I know one particular man who was a billionaire, very big during the Reagan administration, had his own 727 jet like Trump Airlines. He would fly around in his own personal jet. He owned several savings and loans, radio stations, real estate, commercial development companies. And I tell you, he had a private meeting with one of the people working for the Reagan administration and one of the major Republicans. And he was vetting him on what do you think about this? And if this went against your principles, would you still donate to this and this? And
which one was it? Which one was vetting which one? I didn't.
Well, the mainstream Republican guy working in the Reagan administration was vetting the conservative billionaire.
Okay.
And he let it know. He says, no, I'm not going to do anything against the Constitution or anything illegal. And I'll tell you, from the day he got off, in fact, he was on his way with this guy to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Reagan. That's what they were dangling with him if he helped out in all these causes. He was going to meet personally with Reagan.
Okay.
And when he landed in Washington, D.C., the guy said, I just got a call and the president can't meet with you. It was canceled. And this was flying on his own 727, by the way. The guy told him, you fly us to Washington and we'll get you in to see President Reagan. So he had to fly all the way back to Texas without meeting the president. And the next day, 3 of his bankers called in his loans and said, we're closing out your loans.
Wow.
And they end up over a 5 or 6 year period costing him millions in legal fees. SEC got after him. They tried to nail the savings and loan thing on him, and eventually actually sent him to prison on a RICO conspiracy charge, even though none of the financial charges would stick. And now this guy is still a conservative, but nobody wants to talk to him because he doesn't have any money anymore. He's been destroyed.
Right.
So they can go after you if you've got money. If you're big enough to fund conservative causes, they won't let you. It's like Bunker Hunt. They destroyed him in the silver markets because he was funding conservative organizations.
So what's the moral of that story?
The moral of that story is I'm trying to explain why almost everybody in our movement is not wealthy and has financial problems.
And they understand go and buy a bunch of land and develop it and become self-sufficient. They just don't have any money to do it.
Yeah, they understand that. And it's one of the biggest problems I work with consulting with people is that, self-sufficiency and getting some farmland and getting equipment and building the buildings and building a safe room, all of it takes money.
Right.
And, at least I say, if you don't have much money, at least get a home in a safe location with a basement where you can build a safe room. You could build a safe room yourself for less than $10,000 if you've got a basement. It's the cheapest way to do it. And if you can even get in rural areas, land is a lot cheaper. Don't try to get 5 or 10 acres in high profile, high priced areas that are growing like gangbusters. Go out into rural countries that nobody wants to live. There's no jobs out there.
Right.
Land is still fairly cheap, and you can buy. Now, the key to that, of course, is that you've got to be self-sufficient in income. If you're working for a corporation, you have to be in a major city. That's the problem. It's either or. Very few people are self-sufficient enough to go out and do this. But I'm just saying that there is no one-step solution for everyone. Everyone's got to do within their means. But I'll tell you, you can do a lot more than you think if you stop eating out, if you stop eating junk food, if you stop wasting money and time on cable television and other types of things, start really saving and really working hard. You've still got time before this war comes to at least improve your position.
Right.
And sometimes that may be involved getting together with other people. But don't look for survival communities. Those never work out because all the poor people want the one or two people with money to pay for everything. And that's what they all break up over.
So it's not a mistake that the deep state people have chosen money as their primary control over everything, right? I mean, it works pretty universally.
Well, it also lures in big corporations, small corporations, through government contacts. It lures them into the web of deep state control. And then it penalizes those who won't play games. And you just don't get wealthy. But you don't have to be wealthy to survive. You do have to have enough money that you can get a little bit of self-sufficiency property outside. It doesn't take a lot.
Right.
But, you got to get rural.
And you're right that the farther out you're willing to go, the less money you have to use to buy the land, right?
That's right. Unless you get too rural, then if you're 3 hours away from anything, then your costs of getting materials and getting them out to you and getting someone to come and work for you is just nil.
So there's a delicate balance there.
The optimal distance is an hour away from a major metro. You get an hour away out into the rural country. They can't walk to you. And it's still, an hour isn't too far to drive to a Home Depot to get building supplies.
Right. Or a store to get food if you need to.
That's
stuff
right.
like that.
Yeah.
So with what's happening in the economy right now, with it being systematically destroyed by the lockdowns, which seems to be what's planned and what's happening, what does that do to land prices?
Well, so far, California prices have not fallen, even though there's a major exodus out of that state. And that's because a lot of foreigners are moving in, their HB1 visas and all of that. These people are being imported by Silicon Valley and providing, enough salaries that they can pay those outrageous prices. But it's mostly foreigners that are moving into and taking the place of conservatives that are leaving California.
Okay, interesting. And what about other states? I would think, just intuitively what I was thinking is that if the economy is successfully getting destroyed, it would certainly lower land prices. But I don't know.
Well, it's not being destroyed. Remember, there's a tremendous amount of reserve value that's been built up over the centuries in this country. It's, there's not going to be an economic collapse. It's going to squeeze the people out of the economy who are not going to go along, and it's going to reward those big corporations that go along. That's why these corporations are all following these restrictions so that they don't get blackballed.
Right. And that's why Amazon and companies like that are hiring new people and their jobs.
And as I say, brick and mortar is going to be more and more on the way out. Online sales are double what they were last year because of the COVID restrictions. So it's rewarding all of the big tech companies and penalizing. And what it's doing ultimately is making everyone dependent on bailouts. You destroy the little guy in the economy, and then you offer the bailouts, and then you make it contingent on a vaccine or contingent upon following the COVID restrictions or contingent upon joining the New World Order, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's why they're squeezing parts of the economy, not the whole thing. Big corporations will survive.
So you're saying it's not a destruction, it's a redistribution.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. It's a squeezing of a selected portion. They're squeezing the resistance financially to kill it or to convert them into mainstream people that will go along.
Right. So if people don't want to go along and they don't want to turn into a GMO organism by getting the vaccine, they're going to have to be self-sufficient. They're going to have to.
You got to get out of society. You got to get out of society and get self-sufficient. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be It's going to be painful, and you're not going to be rich. You're all going to have to sacrifice what you have to be free. That's the problem.
When they make everything conditional that everyone's living on,
That's
yeah.
right. Anyone who's claiming I can make you wealthy under any crisis is just blowing smoke. It's not going to happen in this crisis because they're going to keep people from participating in society, and that means your inability to make money. When they start having digital, everything is online, and they cut off your bank account if your social credit score is low, you see, then how do you pay your bills if there's no more cash?
So what do you think about the people who are saying you just solve everything with Bitcoin?
Listen, when the war comes and the internet goes down, hard down for a long time, there's going to be no digital currency.
Right. And the movement on
no bank accounts, no credit cards, nothing. You're going to have cash. That's why I don't think they'll ultimately get rid of all cash, but they're going to try to squeeze people out of it for control purposes.
In a way, if we had time, what would be good is a new economic system, right? So that people could get money without being part of the compromised mainstream system.
Well, there isn't time.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's just too busy making a living and surviving the squeeze of inflation and the squeeze of change, and poor restaurant people are going down.
Yeah.
Just incredible. How can you make money when you've got a social distance? They were doing well when everything was jam-packed and full, but hardly anybody's doing well in the restaurant business now.
So still creativity, maybe not enough time to start a new system, but with using the one that there is to the maximum benefit without giving into the stuff that is fatal.
You've got to learn to work for yourself. You've got to learn to provide a service, whether it's repair computers or washing machines or anything. That's always going to be necessary, because the worse society gets, the more people have to rely on repairing things rather than buying new. Yeah. So learn the skills that you should have been learning all through your life. I mean, I've learned about 10 or 11 skills since I graduated from college, and none of them I went to school for.
Right.
I learned it with books and online and other things. So, and watching YouTube videos, you too can do it, but you've got to do it. You've got to buy the tools. You've got to practice it. You've got to make mistakes.
Practical skills.
You've got to get the practical skills, because when you're shut off from participating in the economy, it's barter and skills that you've got to have.
Right. Yeah. And everybody's got all this academic achievement that doesn't actually do anything, or a lot of people have gone through that. So use the time well that remains, I guess, right?
Right.
Get yourself in good shape and learn to do things. So, all right. Well, hold on. We'll say goodbye again in the break here in just a minute.
Okay.